Hi, folks. Steven here. So, this is going to be another one of our live streams. As you can see, I'm here with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. We're going to be discussing, our big discussion tonight is going to be the music of Pokémon Battle Revolution for the Wii. Very notable game, although maybe not. It's kind of interesting how this game sort of played out there. But that is going to be sort of our main discussion. Looks like we've got Enrico is in the chat room as of a few minutes ago. Always love that. We're going to give folks a few minutes to get in here, so we're going to do a little pre-discussion about a few things that have happened recently that won't be part of our main discussion. And have you had a chance to play Pokemon Legends Arceus?
I don't own it, but yes, I have played it. I've been helping my friends binge play it over the past couple weeks. It's been delightful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, people give it a lot of credit for changing up the formula, which is true, but it does have also ideas from, not just other game series, but also from other parts of the Pokemon franchise. The combat actually, in some ways, like during those, whatever they're called, battles at the end of each chapter, it's kind of reminds me of some of the stuff in the Poke Park games. Riding on animals is kind of taken out of some of the later Ranger games.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not maybe completely new, but I do want to give them some credit. Musically, it's interesting. They could have gone with something that was a complete, all traditional sounding Japanese music, and they clearly did not. This is not a carbon copy or any sort of copy of the music. There's a little bit of that, but there's a lot of stuff that you would not hear in Pokemon Conquest for the DS, which we will get to at some point. So that'll be an interesting point of comparison when we get to that. But I don't know. What do you think of that?
I don't know if I have a ton to say about it musically, other than it doesn't go for the low hanging fruit, but that I don't know. Well, I guess I'll have more to say on it later. But as you speaking to the battle style and everything, there's a lot of elements of this game that feel like they picked. Like my friends and I were commenting, a lot of things are the best thing that they loved about Pokemon Go combined with something they loved about the main series games, combined with, something they loved from Ranger or Conquest so there's a lot of, I don't know, bringing together a lot of elements in a way that seems to really work for this game. Not that, like I said, they didn't do anything brand new and exciting, but their greatest strength seems to be just grabbing some of the things that people loved the most from different games and spin-off games and combining it in a way that makes the whole thing new and fresh.
Yeah, greetings from Greece from Enrico. It's obviously very early in the morning there. We always appreciate that. We do try to vary up the times of day that we do these every so often, partially for Anne's schedule. But
if it works out for you guys too, then that's all the better.
Yeah. But going back to the music, one lament some folks have is that there's overworld music that plays in between battles, but it doesn't just get interrupted by battles, it gets interrupted by whenever a Pokemon, a somewhat or moderately aggressive Pokemon spots you and the little eye appears at the thing there. So it's actually, I know that the Rockwell song, Somebody's Watching Me, has come up within the last few months, but, I am kind of reminded, but then that always changes the music to something a little more ominous, and I wonder if they do another game like this, what they might try and do is do different versions of the song where, maybe it changes key or the instruments change or something like that to make it a little bit more of a smooth transition. I don't know.
Or start playing double speed or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but it does create that effect. So that's interesting. I have played through the entire main game and pretty much all of the post-game content to the point where you get to meet the titular character. Spoiler alert! I'm also kind of wondering what they'll do for future installments if they do for this. It's considered a main series game, but if they do other games in this vein, I'm thinking the yellow version of Pokemon Legends would be something like Pokemon Legends Lugia or something, which would be interesting. But there's other stuff. A lot of folks have floated the idea of getting like the original dragon from the Unova region, the 5th generation, doing that story if they go this again. But of course, the next thing we're going to get is Scarlet and Violet as far as main series games go, which is really kind of crazy that in the space of about 12 months we'll have gone through all that. So that's something.
Mm-hmm. A lot of content coming.
And we still don't know if there are any other side games coming this year. I kind of hope they'd announce a new Pokemon Pinball. I did take a look and see what my dream person I would assign it to. Zen Studios is in the process of putting out the newest version of their pinball platform. They did put out a new table just recently for Indiana Jones, but we'll see about that, or if they do. They usually do at least one other thing. I know that Unite is still, doing pretty well and stuff like that. Let's see. And then the other musical thing I want to talk about before we get into our main discussion and start recording that. Did you pick up a vinyl copy of the Pokemon 25 album?
I did not.
Oh. Well,
sorry. That's this is your jam.
I suppose. I did pick up a copy. It's still in the shrink. I think I stored it away. Yeah. I do think, to be honest, I think there'd be a bigger market for like putting some of the catalog Pokemon stuff like the To Be a Master or the first movie pop soundtrack on vinyl would actually be even more popular, and would do even better there. But they did also put out a new music video back during Pokemon Week, for the day on the Friday, the day they put a music video out for Yaffle's Reconnect. Takes place in a Japanese candy store, I guess, and has the things there. And it's nice that it had English subtitles because I realized I was mishearing some of the lyrics there. But I don't know. It's still not like I said, I think my opinion there's a lot of music I like on there, but not a ton that I love compared to some other stuff. And I wish they had gone deeper into later generations of the franchise. It would be really neat to have like at the very least, like I said, I think so they should have done something like for the Diamond and Pearl remake, something Lucario based would be a really safe choice if they're going to pull from a later generation, and stuff like that. So technically, I guess a lot of stuff happening musically.
I did love in the music video, like at the very beginning, they're all showing their Game Boys as kind of like their pass into the cool club. Like if this is the kind of delinquent behavior we're getting up to these days, that I want a part of it.
I suppose. It's just so let's see here.
The secret Pokemon candy shop.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Obviously, there's that. I don't know. I wasn't, to be honest. I like some things about the music videos in there. There wasn't one I think that really. Electric obviously had pretty good production values and had some nice references in it. That's one thing we're going to have to definitely do in the future is sort of a side topic, official Pokemon music videos where we pick out a bunch of them and sort of go over what they are, what they mean, and what we think of them. Because I think that's a thing that we need to do.
That would be a lot of fun.
All right. Well, I think that's enough before chatter. So the way this works, if you haven't been to one of these before, is that we, when we do discuss a side game, the way it generally works is that we take a little time at the beginning to sort of explain how we experienced this game. Tonight's is Pokémon Battle Revolution for the Wii, and we'll take care of that. But let's see, where was I? Oh. And then we usually we talk about sort of the people involved, the release stuff, and then we sort of talk about the overall style, and then we talk about specific tracks. And then we usually go into other sound-based aspects. There is obviously other sound-based stuff in here. Most notably, they did bring back the announcer that was in the first two Stadium games, but not present in the GameCube Coliseum and Gale of Darkness. And then we have a little feedback to go over, and we'll talk about our next episode. And then we do a post segment where we talk about the game itself. So that gives you a little bit of a lay of the land. But let's see here. Well, first off, we have to get set up here for just a second. And in case folks are curious, Enrico, it is 8 o'clock right here in the Central Time Zone. It'd actually be 9 o'clock in New York. Just the way the time zones work in the U.S. So, oh,
7 p.m. for me.
and actually, tomorrow's the day in the U.S. where all the clocks spring ahead, so we lose an hour of sleep. So that'll be
Right.
extra fun. I have to be careful about that. I have to get to. I have a ticket for. There's a re-showing of Detective Pikachu this weekend, and I have a ticket for tomorrow. So I have to make sure that I set my
Yeah,
clock.
don't.
My phone will automatically update. My computer will automatically update, and stuff like that. But
But yeah, do not want to be showing up an hour late for that.
especially since tomorrow is Pokemon Go Community Day for Sandshrew, so kind of time. I do plan on doing a live stream about that. It'll probably be on Monday night, just because of scheduling and stuff, and because I want to work on some other things. But that's effectively what I'm doing for it. So, Anne, are you just about ready to get going on the actual discussion?
I am ready.
All right.
Yes.
We have a little different recording setup on my end. I bought a new high-end recorder, but so let me go ahead and see what we got there. Do our levels look good? I think so. All right, and then we start the recording now. All right, and so what we're going to do here is the way we usually do this is we're going to leave a little bit of a pause. If you have comments at any time during this, go ahead and type those into the chat. We will try to work those into our discussion. No promises, but we'll try to do that. If you're watching this on replay, do still feel free to give us a comment. We always appreciate that, and we'll try to work those into a future discussion. But for now, we're just going to leave a little pause, and then I'm going to do the introduction. Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. And after several, I guess you could say, side episodes in between generations, we're finally ready to talk about the first side Pokemon game of Generation 4, the Diamond and Pearl generation. And that is Pokemon Battle Revolution for the Wii. There's actually a fair bit of material to cover here, both with the being a new generation and a new system and all that stuff. Let's see here. And we'll try to cover as much of it as we can in the time that we have. So first off, let's sort of talk about a little bit of background on this. This was a very early Wii game, actually. In Japan, it released in December of 2006, so less than a month after the system came out there. In the US and Europe, it had to wait a little bit longer because at that point, Diamond and Pearl weren't out yet, so the game tied to them wouldn't make much sense to put it out. But in the US, we got it in June of 2007, and then, let's see, Europe and Australia got it late in the year. This is still when things were pretty spaced out sometimes, so that's not entirely surprising. Since this is not only a new generation and a new game and all that stuff, but also a new system, I kind of want to talk about the Wii itself just a little bit. Now, until a few months ago, from when we were recording this, the Wii was Nintendo's best-selling home console. The Switch has now surpassed it. But as far as getting the system itself, I didn't get it on launch day, but I did get, but about a week before Christmas or so, when the last shipment was coming in, I got wind of that, and I decided to camp out in front of a Best Buy in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I was in college at the time. And it could have been a lot worse. It was in like the 20s overnight. You could get a lot worse in Wisconsin in December. So it was tolerable, but I did basically camp out in front overnight and get the system. Not an experience I care to repeat anytime soon, but excuse me. But Anne, what was your sort of experience with the system itself? How did you get exposed to it?
Well, I definitely did not get it on launch day because, oh gosh, how old was I even? I would have been like very much not able to get any system on its launch day. I remember when I got my Wii, I got the Wii Mini, and it was like we were well into the Wii U generation. But because it was now an older quote unquote console, I was able to get it refurbished, used for cheap. It was bright red Mario themed, and I loved that thing a lot. I don't have it anymore because I had to pawn it off to get my Switch, but it was a lot of fun playing games on that thing.
Well, I kind of recommend you actually get a regular Wii, not the Wii Mini, if you're trying to buy one used. So if you ever get the opportunity to pick one of those up, I actually a lot of folks just recommend you get a Wii U if you can find one on the used market. But yeah, I mean, it was a cultural phenomenon, just the system itself. Um,
Hmm.
like we hadn't really seen.
Anything like it, yeah.
As far as this particular game, though, that came out in the States in 2007. So I think I was aware of it. Um, but I think I first got some practice in with it at I think a GameStop event. They did like a 1 day tournament type of deal where you could bring your DS in, and the winner of the whole tournament actually got a copy of the game. I wasn't the winner, so I didn't get it that
Wow.
way. I think I got it for maybe my birthday in 2007. Um, and certainly played through it a fair bit and stuff like that. And what was your sort of experience with this game? It sounds like you must have gotten it. Did you play it at someone else's place, or how did that all come
Yeah,
about?
so um it's kind of like it surprises me, like looking at the timeline and thinking about it, and like when all the dates would have gone down. Um but I actually played this when I was living in Japan. Like somebody in the dorms had a Wii, and like we would have like just parties where we would play Wii games, and this is one of the games that was brought to the table occasionally, because it was a fun one to play or watch other people play. And it didn't have a ton of plot, so you didn't feel like you were missing much if you like weren't there one of the get-togethers or something. So I played and watched people play this game a lot, um, in very sporadic bursts in the evenings.
Yeah, it has some significance. It was the first like Wii disc game that used online. I mean, obviously the system did have some online capacity from the start to get to like the Wii Shop channel, but this was the first game that actually used online on the Wii, which had sort of been trialed on the DS a few years earlier. So this is sort of what they used to promote that. As far as the game's production, it was produced by Genius Sonority, which should be a pretty familiar name. Of course, they also produced the GameCube Pokemon battling games, Pokemon Coliseum, and XD Gale of Darkness. We've done discussions on both of those games. You can check the archives. So, based on what we kind of know, it seems like they may not have had a ton of time to work on this and may have had to. It's hard to say exactly what got cut or stuff like that. We'll talk more about that, I suppose, later. But going on to the music, another non-surprise here. Tsukasa Tawada is credited as the musician for this game. He also worked on Coliseum and Gale of Darkness, and I would say the style, instrument-wise, is pretty similar in terms of the sample used. But the overall musical style, the game takes place in something called Poketopia, which is sort of this, well, it's a city of tomorrow type of thing. So a lot of the music in the game is very electronic based. And I assume that was your sort of, I, sorry, the word just popped into me and then popped out of my mouth.
But the answer is yes.
Okay, 1 second. And I assume that was your assessment as well.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, I think that does some interesting things to the structure of some of the songs and stuff like that, and sort of changes. Like there was high tech stuff in the GameCube games that were made, but this goes in a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah, like it's like in the, I don't know, later games that came to the Wii, like it doesn't feel like it's all that, but it really is a step above in a lot of ways some of the games that came before.
Interesting. Well, not sure. We'll talk more about that.
Okay, yeah, maybe that made more sense in my head. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. In any case, we've done what we usually do here. Anne and I have each picked out 3 songs. Let's see. The ones I picked out were Main Street Coliseum. Let's see. Courtyard Coliseum. And Joe's Theme. And what were the 3 you picked out?
Yes, I picked Kruger's theme, the Lagoon theme, and Mysterial's theme, the final battle theme.
Yeah, so we're going to do what we usually do and go one by one, alternating on this is how we usually try to work it out. So I've kind of arranged these in loosely in order, kind of like you would experience in the game. You do have, like some of the other Pokemon Stadium type games, you do have some flexibility in what order you complete certain things, so it's hard to come up with an exact order for some of this. But my first song is Main Street Coliseum. So, sort of some of the descriptors I came up with this, it seems like there's a very busy quality to it, which I think is supposed to suggest that there are things going on in and around the Colosseum within the city. Like there are people passing by and stuff like that. There's a lot of, beep isn't quite the word I want to use, but very synth-type instruments and stuff like that. That's just a very busy atmosphere. And is that sort of the vibe you got?
Yes. Busy is the good word. Like every even a mellow track like has a lot of movement in its music.
Yeah, and one instrument I noticed was the horns, they seem like they're trying to grab the attention of the players, almost as if someone's like walking down the main street. It's a little bit interesting the way the music is structured in terms of not like the actual compositions, but how it's used. Every venue in this game has a theme associated with it, as opposed to like in the Colosseum and Gale of Darkness, or in a more usual Pokemon game, you'd kind of expect each city or each town or each area to have its own thing. So they had to do something a little bit different here, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely with Main Street, like you get the vibe of like the hustle and bustle of the city, as you're saying. Like listening to it without the context of Pokemon, like I could almost see a Tron-style racing game with music like this. Like I get the sense of like roads and like just going very fast down the road past all the buildings in this futuristic world kind of a feeling.
Yeah, now from a music appreciation portion though, I do think that there's a lot of this track is kind of emblematic of sort of a lot of darting around that some of the more electronic focused tracks do. And what I kind of mean by that is if you go back to the stuff from Colosseum and Gale of Darkness, the tracks are about as long for a lot of the battle themes, but they seem to follow more I don't know if linear is the right word, but more the instrumentation seems to build on itself a little more directly, if that makes sense. Whereas with this one, I felt like your attention was as far as the music goes, it wasn't so, it isn't super distracting or anything. It doesn't hamper the gameplay aspect. But from a musical perspective, it does kind of feel like your attention is being shifted every few measures or whatever like that. And did you get that feeling from this track?
Yeah, it does have a lot of different movements. Which I kind of like because, as you say, it's not super distracting or anything, but it keeps it from getting repetitive. It like shifts its, I don't know, its vibe or its rhythm or its speed or like, it just changes ever so slightly every so often, just enough that, if say it was on loop for a while, you could let it be in the background, but also not be bored by it.
All right. Well, basically, when I chose this track, I was trying to set a few seeds for later, but for the time being, Anne, why don't you talk about your first track? This is the Lagoon Coliseum. First of all, this Coliseum has a very specific purpose, and why don't you tell us about that and also, I guess, the song that goes with it?
All right. Well, Lagoon theme, if we thought we were in a futuristic world, now we descend into the Matrix. Trying to remember what the lagoon theme area was, its specific purpose.
Okay, and I'll fill you in here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, the lagoon area is specifically used for online battling. So if you're battling against online opponents, either random or friends, I believe it uses that area and therefore that song.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that was one thing that kind of stuck out for me. So Anne, do you want to take that from the top?
I mean, I honestly don't think I can say much better than you did, but yeah, so like this is this when you want to do the online areas, you're in the lagoon area, and that's the theme that plays. I think you said it better.
All right. So
But
I'll restart the thing there. So, okay. Well, Anne, why don't we go on to your first track? This is the Lagoon Coliseum. Now, if you don't recall this, maybe it's because you never battled online, because that's what this area is used for. Anne, why don't you tell us a little bit about the music that plays there?
yeah, so I picked this theme less because I remembered it so well from my bygone days, clearly, but because like it's just such a fascinating track. Like if we thought the main street had kind of a futuristic city vibe and I said a Tron style vibe to it. This is one where it starts out like it feels like you're making contact with the aliens and then you descend into the Matrix. It is all of those futuristic synth sounds and like whatever stereotypical computer world sounds you're thinking of poured into this. And I feel like it's less, not the least, I'll talk about that later, but the least jazzy track in this album, the second to least jazzy track in this album, because jazz does feature heavily in many of these tracks.
Yeah, including one I've picked for later. Yeah, I definitely use the word, I don't know if it qualifies as techno, but there's a lot of technical aspects, and I don't mean like technique, I mean like a lot of sci-fi based stuff here, which is kind of interesting given that this Coliseum is actually the least high-tech looking out of pretty much everything, other than maybe like the Crystal or Waterfall Coliseum. But it's definitely not the most high-tech looking place on there. And, it's also, we mentioned this is, and we mentioned that this is used for the online battles. Of course, you haven't been able to do that for quite some time, at least not normally without some sort of shenaniganry on there. So, but it was a big, important feature of the game. So it's kind of interesting they would give it its own place rather than having folks like randomly select or just have the players select a venue, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
One thing I did note about this track though is I almost feel like there should be something going on top of it, like I don't know if it's like a rapper or something like that should go on top of this. I felt there wasn't as maybe as much body or melody to this one, which I guess, and you kind of agree with, but
yeah, no, I agree. It could use an overarching little melody, especially if it were not, say, a track playing underneath a lot of gameplay, which given that it's kind of where you connect to the internet, there's not really a ton of stuff you have to focus on. Like it could stand to take on a little extra stimulation, I suppose, in the form of like I said, a overarching melody. But now that you mention it, like when you brought up a rapper, like it is the type of track that especially not like some years ago I would have remembered being kind of hawked as a track you could buy to lay down your sick beat. So yeah, like it's very much got that, I don't know, potential use to it.
Yeah, so that did kind of strike me there. Let's see. Okay. Well, I think we've covered that track about as well as we can. Let's go on to my second pick, which is the Courtyard Coliseum. So this is one that's shaped, has a very medieval inspiration, has some interesting, I think it has like stained glass windows and stuff. It also has an element that looks kind of like a Bastiodon built into the design there. Gives it, I guess, a bit of a fortress feel, perhaps. As far as the actual music used for it, this is going back more towards traditional instrumentation. There is still a little bit of a high-tech aspect to it, but you've got some strings, some organ, harpsichord, stuff like that, which I think gives it a little more of a, like I said, a throwback kind of retro vibe. And, maybe some of that's in fitting with this Poketopia place being kind of theme parky, like that, and having sort of a fantasy setting. I don't know. And this is another one of those songs where I've kind of come up with a jumble of a word cloud of sorts to describe it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have in my notes that like this track is somehow very evocative of both Zelda games and Kingdom Hearts, like specifically the Hercules Colosseum world. And like remember like when I heard it, I went looking through Tsukasa Tawada's like IMDb, and I'm not seeing like a ton of exposure to Zelda in his career, but like there's something about this that really kind of harkens those two games back to memory. And I think a lot of it has to do with like this courtyard, Colosseum, big, grand, fantasy, medieval. Like there's something about um that, I don't know, sonic touchstone or the zeitgeist of that kind of um I don't know, the music we all picture when we think of that, like he managed to hit on it really well. It feels like you're in a castle, in a courtyard, in a coliseum, in something big and grand and fantasy-esque. I really like also all the little arpeggios in this track. Um, it's just, I don't know, it just got a lot of very interesting movement to it.
Yeah, speaking of movement, one of the words or one of the phrases I wrote down for this was night chase theme. And that's night with an N, not a K, although I suppose you could go that way. And it sort of feels like something that could be used in that type of scenario there, maybe for a chase scene in maybe not literally, but in like around a castle or some other, historical structure like that. I don't know, Anne, any thoughts there?
I think I agree with you. I don't know if I have much to add on top of that, but I can kind of see that.
All right, well, Anne, let's go on to one of your picks. Now, structurally, this game, every area in the game pretty much has a boss that you fight at the end of whatever challenge you're getting. Each Coliseum has a little bit of a different structure behind it, but at the end, you're going to fight a boss. And not every one of them, but some of them have their own themes. And for Courtyard Coliseum, the boss character is Kruger, and he does have a theme. And why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, so Kruger, as you say, he is a leader of the area, the Colosseum, and I this theme has got like some very future groove, like almost funk to it. I really like the synth vox effects, which is kind of like a synthesized, very early synthesized voicey effects added to it, and it just kind of like I don't remember a ton of this guy's personality. Like this game doesn't have a ton in the way of plot, so you didn't really get to know these characters super well, but it kind of just suggests a lot about maybe what his personality is. Like this is a very fun track and it's playful, and it just kind of feels like it's improvising in a lot of ways, which like, again, this whole album is very jazzy in a way. So there's a lot to like about this track.
Yeah, Kruger's design, you might have been expecting someone who looked more like they were in a knight in shining armor, but that is not what it does. It actually does a guy in a very flashy suit type of arrangement.
Yeah, he's going to play the set while the knights joust is what.
Perhaps. I definitely agree with you on the sort of the early synth on some of that. Something I don't know if it's actually designed to emulate a Moog synth. I think it's Moog or Moog. I forget.
Moog.
But
it's a Moog.
Yeah. But it is definitely something you might hear in the 60s or 70s, that type of synthesizer, as opposed to, say, like FM synth. It definitely sounds to me like that, unless I'm terribly wrong in my synthesizer history. But yeah, that's kind of what they go there. There is still a little bit of, I think, strings or medieval influence in this track, sort of going along with the venue there. So that is still part of it. Any other thoughts on this one, Anne?
I think other than waxing rhapsodic of just how funky it is, no.
All right. Well, another area in the game that has a boss with a distinct theme is the Gateway Coliseum, and the boss of that one is called Joe. Unlike the XD and Gale of Darkness, where they seem to kind of go out of their way to give a lot of characters very strange names. To be honest, I kind of joke that it sounds like something I would use in one of those unscramble the word games that you play. But what they have, this one is just called Joe. He's very much a sort of a, I'm not sure exactly how to describe him, lounge act type of thing, very much a musical performer thing, and his theme definitely heads in that direction. It's extremely jazzy. This is probably the most jazzy track in the game, with a lot of saxophone and stuff. Structurally, the one thing I kind of notice is that it has a slow and a fast section that alternates, which, going along with the Pokemon battle, I think is kind of an interesting thing, although they're not really timed in any specific way. I don't know, Anne, another word cloud, I guess, but what were your kind of thoughts on this one?
Yeah, my thoughts were, again, this is a track that really kind of gives us a dash of personality. Like Joe, he's there with his blue hair and his like casino chip and diamonds on his suit. Like he looks like he's, here in a Vegas casino or something. And then his theme is like the jazziest. There's so much bass. Yeah, like it just kind of, it's very fitting of a boss, like, and very fitting of like a Pokemon character who is important. Like he gets all the character design, he gets all the musical design. And it's very surprising considering his name is Joe. In English speaking countries is usually a very bland name. So that's very surprising. But again, his Japanese name is also Joe, and maybe that's not the same association they have over there. So I don't know what the thought is behind that.
Yeah, I've sometimes brought up that something being foreign can make it seem more exotic than it actually is sometimes. So that's possibly a case there. It's certainly a name they would have heard of in Japan as far as English/Western names go.
And Joe is like, it is a bunch of Japanese syllables that they use in naming too. So it's, again, I'm not sure if they're what they're going for here, but it's kind of a bit of an interesting choice over on this side of the ocean, where we're just like, Joe, you beige name.
Yeah, and going back to the sort of fast and slow stuff, like I said, it just alternates between them. It doesn't do anything. Like I would think that maybe one thing they could have done here structurally in this game is change the music style between, like, when you're choosing moves between, and then when those moves are actually being executed and stuff like that. For an example of where that happens, if you've played Paper Mario Origami King, it does do something like that, where between when you're spinning the wheels to try and align the monsters versus when you're actually carrying out your actions, the music changes a little bit. That's not what's happening here, which is maybe a bit of a missed opportunity, but probably also something they didn't have time to implement and such. All right, well, once you've gone through all the main Colosseums, there's about 6 or 8 or 10 of them. I forget exactly how many there are you have to go through in the main game. You eventually get to go to something called the Stargazer Coliseum, where you refight a lot of the bosses, and one new boss, which Anne has picked out the theme from was basically the last battle in at least the main part of the game. This is, let's see, how's it? Mysterial's battle theme. This is the last one before the end credits. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this, Anne?
All right, so Mysterial, our rotund, spangled little gentleman, he's the final battle, the final boss, and the music is not what you'd expect considering the rest of the soundtrack, but it is what you'd expect from a final boss. Like, there is timpani, there is like the World of Pokemon motif being weaved in through there. Like, there's also a feel of a castle and something very majestic, like you beat Bowser and you're standing on top of the parapet and surveying the kingdom. Or it is the least jazzy track, I think. Like, it feels very much like an orchestra vibe, this particular song. And again, it's what you'd expect from a final battle theme. It's not necessarily what I would have expected from the design of Mysterio. Like I said, he's a very interesting character, but like I would have expected something maybe a little bit more playful and and like improvisational, given that like he levitates things and disappears into smoke and all kinds of stuff while you're battling him. But um like it is definitely the boss track vibes.
Yeah, this is certainly the least high tech sounding. It's very much
Mm.
traditional, much more orchestral. I put down the phrase "jousting knights,"
Mm.
and which is kind of like people riding on horseback, coming at each other. Sort of like used in a Pokemon context. So that was sort of the vibe I got there. You mentioned a little bit about his character. Since there's no overarching story like there is with the other games, you kind of have to guess at what's going on there. Whether this guy is supposed to be some high up official who's holding some sort of big tournament or something like that, or what his background is and why he is the way he is. The track is maybe not as whimsical as you would expect from a very magical character being the final boss of the game, I guess. That isn't the word I would really use to describe this. I don't know, Anne, have any disagree on that one?
I definitely agree. Like, given that, like, when you beat him, um, like, he gives you a crown, like, and, like, you get the title of Poketopia, like, king or queen. Um, like, I can kind of get, and given that, the courtyard theme also had a very kind of fantasy medieval vibe to it, too, like, I can see what they were going for. But yeah, it's very surprising. Like that's a definite choice to not go with again something more um magical or mischievous or just something that seems to reflect who this guy looks to be on the paper.
But overall, I think it's pretty successful, tonally as a last big battle,
Mm.
that you've come to the end of the thing there. So I think it definitely works in that regard.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, let's talk about a few of the other sound based aspects here. Give me 1 second. All right, well, let's talk about some of the other sound based aspects here. One thing they did bring back from the Stadium games that wasn't in the GameCube Coliseum and XD Gale of Darkness games is there is an announcer for this. Now, it's not Ted Lewis, it's not the announcer that was used in the early part of the series, and I'm not even sure if the anime, I hope someone knows, at this point was using an announcer for like the big end of arc league battles and stuff like that. The announcer, at least in the English version of the game, is Roger Parsons, the announcer for the TV show. The person who does the intro at the start of the episode usually, and usually at the end of the episode as well. And has been doing that, other than a brief period during Hoenn, for the entire run up to this day. So you do get a little bit of a different vibe because the announcer for the TV show is a little different than what you would expect for like a sports casting announcer. So he does have phrases for like all the Pokemon, a lot of the moves and stuff like that. One nice thing is that since this is a disc-based game and not a tiny N64 cartridge, the fidelity's a lot better. Because they didn't have to resort to using super heavy Factor 5 based compression to fit a ton of audio clips into this game, which was nice. And what are your sort of thoughts on the announcer? And when you play this, you usually leave it on or off. It is switchable.
I remember having it on. I kind of thought it was just a fun I found it a fun addition, like, again, because I love the Pokemon anime, so anything that kind of makes me feel like I'm living in the world of the anime is always a good thing in my book. I do know that a lot of people, some of the people I played with, definitely a lot of people on the internet, um, found it a little bit annoying and preferred to toggle it off. But I liked it.
And we can't look up every territory on here. I'm not sure what they did in like Europe and stuff like that. But we did look up at the Japanese info. And what do you have on there?
Yeah, so the narrator for this game appears to be, as best I can tell looking it up, a gentleman named Horiuchi Kenyu. Mr. Horiuchi, he's a voice actor who's done a lot of work on Pokemon and is, he seems to be like the second narrator. It looks like, I think it's Unsho, what's his name? Unsho Ishizuka, who was like the original voice of the narrator, voice of the Professor Oak. Um, and it appears that this guy Horiichi did the narrator on like the Pokemon side stories, and I don't see him getting a lot of other credits for being the narrator until Sun and Moon, where he's, you know, doing Samson Oak and then kind of getting a lot more credits as narrator. So I don't know when exactly, like who did what voice when, but it looks like for whatever reason in this game, Horiuchi Kenyu got the job to be the narrator for this game.
Yeah, one thing I remember here is actually one of the new Gen 4 moves is Trick Room. And when that's used, they're not impersonating the actor directly, but I think I've heard the Japanese one for this and also the English one. It sounds like they're doing like in terms of their vocal like meter and spacing and stuff, they're trying to do an impression of sort of those really corny impressions people do of William Shatner from Star Trek as Captain Kirk when he's spacing out his words really far apart. It sounds kind of like that. They're not impersonating Shatner's actual voice, but that one really did stick out to me. I remember hearing the Japanese one back in like 2008 at they did a small mini competition at Worlds that year. It wasn't labeled as an actual Worlds championship because it was just U.S. and Japan. But I did get to hear some of the Japanese stuff there, and yeah, that quote is it definitely sounds like they're trying to sort of mimic that. There's also other weird stuff for like other weird stuff that can happen, like when you attack your own Pokemon. That's come up. I've heard of that one. They did kind of have to stop using that once we got into the Heart Gold Soul Silver era because it didn't support all the features. We'll talk more about that in the game discussion, but yeah, I think it's kind of nice having that back. And they did have, you know, since they weren't as space constrained, they had more stuff on there they could do. All right, well, let's sort of talk about our overall impressions of the music. I mean, the Pokemon cries are in there and stuff. Sorry. All right, well, there are some other things in there. There's stuff like the Pokemon cries, which I think are pretty standard at this point. But let's sort of give our overall opinion of the sound design and music of this game. Overall, I liked this, but you might have caught that I wasn't as impressed by the work here as I was with the GameCube. You know, Gale of Darkness and Coliseum games had some pretty nice stuff in there. I don't know, Anne, it sounds like you were a little more in the groove than I was on this one.
I don't know about in the groove. I liked it for what it was. I definitely feel like it being the first Wii game kind of shows in a way. Like, I think this is what I was trying to say earlier, beginning of the episode. Like I feel like it's a step up in some ways from some of the GameCube games that we've talked about in the past, of just its general sound design and like the music and the quality and like a lot of things, and just down to the gameplay itself even. But for like one of the first games for a brand new console that has like so many unique features that to the Wii that, you know, we had never seen in other types of consoles before, it feels a little lacking. So, and I kind of felt like as the years go by and like more Wii specific games, like things you could only do on a Wii and with a Wiimote, and like, you know, really made use of the console's unique features, and its expanded capacities and like, I don't know, higher def. Like you probably know a lot more about the technical aspect of those types of things than I do. I feel like over time its age began to show that this, was a step up maybe from what had came before, but not such a step up that it continued to be amazing as the months, years went on, if that makes sense.
Perhaps a little bit. I mean, by this point, like, sound engines are pretty close to where they are today. They're not quite as advanced. They don't have quite the same capacity. Like, from a technical perspective, the Wii is basically a somewhat more powerful GameCube. There's always that famous phrase, two GameCubes duct taped together or whatever. It sort of depends on how much you're using the motion controls and other features and stuff like that. It is a beefed up GameCube in many ways. But sort of from a structural standpoint, I had said in one of the earlier tracks that I felt that there wasn't as much melodical stuff in there, and I think that's kind of true kind of across the board. I did have to double check like the length of the loops in this game versus the GameCube games, and I found out that they're actually not that dissimilar, but the way that they are structured is different. It seems like there's more... just not as much given to sort of the main groove of a lot of these, with some exceptions. Like Joe's theme, obviously, is pretty much straight jazz there, and the Mysterio's battle theme is sort of like that. But stuff like the Main Street Coliseum, maybe it doesn't, and I'm sure some of this is by design, some of it is probably time constraints and stuff like that. This doesn't seem to have, like, this is going back to sort of the radio producer, or whatever you want to say, part of me, is that a lot of this music is not as radio worthy, I would think, as some of the stuff from the other games. I don't know. How do you feel about that, Anne?
I think you bring up a really interesting point. Like, my first thought kind of is related to like splicing music together for, like, say, a dance or a skating or, like some sort of performance in which, like, you're thinking of, you don't want to spend too much time in any one particular feel of the music. Like, you want to use cuts where it's like you get a sense of that song or that beat or that emotion, and then you move on, so that the whole track feels like it goes several different places, without ever lingering on any one thing so long that it feels stale and passe. But you also bring up a point that you don't listen to that type of music on the radio. It fulfills its purpose of being an art piece. So I think there's an interesting, question to ask, I guess, the composer and the music mixers and everybody in this game of, like, do they intend their song to, like, fulfill, again, like, a specific purpose where they don't necessarily want to let the track breathe and settle into its groove and its melody and whatever, because they're trying to accomplish something specific? Or, as you point out, would it have been better to make the tracks a little longer, a little fuller, maybe a little more melody or a little more to it, so that it has listening power and you could listen to it, it just for the sake of it being a song, and play it on the radio, play it as part of a playlist, that sort of thing. Like, I don't know, there's an interesting discussion to be had here.
Yeah, and like I said, I suspect some of the structural things there are just because they didn't have as much time as they would have liked to get this out there.
Also a good point.
I do think the music and the game, which we'll talk more about in our bonus segment, did turn out better than another early platform, or early in the system's life Pokemon game we talked about last year, which was Pokemon Dash. I do think this turned out better than that. But yeah, so yeah, I think that kind of, there's a lot of things that, what ifs in regards to this game. What if they had had more time and stuff? And we'll go into some of those during our bonus segment. But I'm not unhappy with the music, but I'm not as impressed by it as I was with Coliseum and Gale of Darkness. And maybe that's just because it isn't as much of a departure from what came before in certain ways. Like, you can definitely tell the same person worked on all three of these games. But I don't know. I mean, this is something maybe we'll have to ponder, and if you have any thoughts, do let us know. And speaking of letting us know, we have some feedback we'd like to go over. All right. Yeah, we always appreciate feedback. You can send it to pokepress@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on one of these videos if you happen to be watching this on YouTube. Or you can always drop us a line on Twitter @Pokepress. But in any case, we do have a little bit to go over. So I do have one comment here. This is actually from one in a series of videos I've put out over the last month or so. The month before we recorded this, I had a chance to go to my first convention in a very long time, at least as far as covering it as press, and that is Anime Milwaukee. And I got to go to a lot of press sessions. I still have a few more I need to edit as of the recording of this. But this is Johnny Young Bosch. I hope I said that sort of close to right. He's kind of best known, well, really for a lot of things. His sort of into the Pokemon realm is that in the Pokemon Origins miniseries, in one of the early parts, he does the voice of Brock, which, in the main anime is obviously for many seasons a big part. This case, not as much, but I still wanted to get some information from him. He's actually probably best known as being, I guess, the second Black Power Ranger in the localized version of that show. But we also talk about some of his other stuff there. The comment I got is from Tyreek Correa. I have no idea if I said that anywhere close to right. I'm very sorry if I terribly butchered that. But one thing I mentioned in the video itself via a little pop-up annotation is that he mentions how he studies for a lot of the rules when he applies for them, which makes a lot of sense, generally speaking. But this is a guy who has a martial arts background, and I felt that was very much in keeping the way he described it, the tone he used, in with sort of his martial arts, someone who had gone through a lot of martial arts training. Now, Tyreek TC here says, Johnny's attitude towards this is just a matter of good sense, which I kind of agree with. Obviously, it's always a good idea whenever you're being asked for if he'd be interested in a role or something like that to do a little research. He was only doing martial arts for exercise at this point, and he does seem to be in relatively good shape, so I'll certainly give him that. Wasn't going to ask him to prove it right there in front of me, but like I said, I think it's just the tone of voice that he used in there. You could tell this was someone who was very purposeful in a lot of the stuff he does, and formal, and has that sort of thing, despite being an actor in, Power Rangers, which is, obviously based around martial arts, but also a fairly, doesn't take itself too seriously. I don't know, Anne, I know that you've had a chance to take a look at some of these. I don't know if you had any thoughts on this particular one.
Not a ton, but I would agree. Like, he seems like a person who, if he's gonna do something, he's gonna, as you say, put some thought into it, do some research, and do it, quote, right, like do it in a way that he feels satisfied with, which is really admirable and good for him. Definitely, I think that he brings a very different personality to Brock, and the character of Brock in Pokemon Origins is a very different personality than the Brock we've come to know and love, and so I kind of like the idea that the person behind that was, probably put some real thought into it, in the way that he seems to put a lot of thought and effort and care into everything he does.
Yeah. It like I said, everyone, I always recommend that you do research on a role before you try to put yourself in there. But the way he said it just impressed me as I was editing this video, and I wanted to put a little note in there. In case you're curious, some of the other interviews we have here, which should all be on the podcast feed by the time you hear this there, people like Billy Kay, another last name I'm not too good on, but he actually did the voice of Dr. Zed in Secrets of the Jungle, so that's another one to watch out for. But yeah, it was nice getting back in there, although, like I said, I kind of went straight back into the fire there with 6 different press sessions. Still have 2 more I'm working on, so that'll be some stuff to look forward to. But yeah, we always appreciate feedback on this or anything else. You can always drop us a comment or drop us an email, pokepress@gmail.com. All right, well, we've just started on the 4th generation. 4th generation has a lot of side games in it. In particular, since we go in North American release order, 2008 had a lot of Pokemon side games, at least 3 or 4, I believe, that we'll be talking about on here. But the first one in release order is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time / Darkness / Sky. So yeah, we mentioned, we did our Red Blue Rescue Team discussion last year. And these are the follow-ups on the strictly DS games, no Game Boy Advance on any of these. And they were 2 released initially, Time and Darkness, and this was so popular. This actually, we talked about Pokemon Stadium a little bit earlier. For a long time, that had been the record for the best-selling side games. These are the ones that broke that record. And I guess probably until like Pokemon Go, which is kind of its own category, were the best-selling Pokemon side games. But yeah, some really, really fantastic thematic music in this one, which is always something I think I kind of drive for. And it's going to be tough to pick out just the tracks we want to use for this one, but we're still going to try and do it. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun discussing this one. And I assume you're looking forward to this one as well.
I am. It's going to be... I love the Mystery Dungeon series. I'm not as familiar with this one as I was the first one, but nonetheless, I'm very excited.
Yeah, this one has not been remade, at least not yet. I kind of suspect they'll actually do an original Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game before they remake these, but definitely looking forward to it. Until then, Anne, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks. All right, that's the end of the slideshow, but we are doing our usual bonus segment. Let's see here. So we'll be talking about the game Pokémon Battle Revolution itself. So let's see, let me get back my notes up here and we'll sort of go through that. So yeah, this was, but we'll sort of be going over sort of all the non-musical aspects, so the visual design and sort of the online features a bit, although I think, Anne, you probably didn't get much of a chance to experience those, and I didn't do much with them either. But I have a bunch of little bullet points here to go over, but yeah, we do a game discussion right afterwards. So give a little pause again, and then I'll do an introduction there. Okay, so let's talk about Pokemon Battle Revolution as a game. So, I kind of mentioned during our main discussion that as far as early console generation Pokemon games go, I did prefer this to Pokemon Dash that we talked about last time, both musically and otherwise. But I do kind of suspect that this was another game that was a victim of a short development cycle and not having enough time to totally flesh stuff out. We kind of have mentioned there's no like overarching story or anything like that. Was that a disappointment to you, Anne?
In some ways. Like at the time, like I was saying, I was playing it in kind of very specific circumstances and like the game wasn't mine. So it's like I loved it for what it was at the time. But I typically prefer games with a bit more of a plot, a bit more of a role play element and, you know, being able to explore a little more. So I definitely think that while it didn't necessarily, like, it wasn't something I was consciously thinking of, like, oh, this game, like, doesn't have a plot, I hate it. But I definitely think it's something that could, like, the omission of that could have hurt it over time. Especially maybe for some other people who were, say, binge playing it, you know, and not just kind of playing it sporadically with other people.
Yeah, and you can kind of see how they could have, you know, if they had... I assume that they made this decision not to have an overarching story fairly early, but you could totally see how this Poketopia could have functioned like the Ore region, and could have had a thing where it builds up towards the end there, where you have to, battle. Like Mysterio has some sort of role in the plot, whether he's truly a villain or more of like this person holding this big tournament or something like that. That is the framing device of it. But unfortunately, like I said, we did not get that. At the same time, it doesn't have some of the side stuff from the first two Stadium games. It doesn't have mini games or other stuff like that. Did you kind of miss those?
Yes. That is that is something that I miss. Like but like it's kind of unfair to want it to be previous Pokemon games when it's its own thing. But yes, like I wanted more in the way of, like, especially since you could play with people on the internet and you could play with your friends, and like I wanted more in the way of like tournaments and maybe more location if for single player, especially. I think if I had owned this game, I really wanted more locations to explore and, like, again, more stadiums to compete at and things like that.
Yeah, it definitely does feel like it's on the thin side. And like I said, I think they would have needed another 6 or 12 months. I don't know if it was a super high priority that Nintendo wanted to have an online game and maybe perhaps specifically a Pokemon game at or near launch or within the first, 6 to 12 months, if that was their goal there or what. But it does seem
Definitely.
like, yeah. But even more so than some of the other games, that this seems to not have a lot of use outside of unless you're going to have Diamond and or Pearl have access to those. I suppose the one nice thing about all of that, though, is that it's since you can do it all wirelessly, it's much easier to transfer your teams over to the to the Wii that way. But maybe at the same time that the first two Stadium games had the ability to play your games on the TV using the transfer pack, and this doesn't have anything like that either. I don't know.
Yeah, for real, I felt like, again, at the time that I was experiencing it, it had a lot going for it in, again, the ability to play online, all the stuff you could do, like transferring Pokemon between games, like, was super cool at the time. Um, just, again, it very quickly became not the only game to allow you to play with people online, not even the only Pokemon game. Um, and like, again, it didn't take long for people to, especially people who didn't have Diamond and Pearl, to be like, there's not much else here. So again, it's like I don't want to knock it too hard because I have very fond memories of legitimately enjoying this game, but I can definitely see how just there's not that much to this game, and I can see people very quickly realizing that the pond is not super deep.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the technical aspects. First of all, this game, I would say graphically, is definitely an improvement over the GameCube games. I think the frame rate is better. I don't know if it's a full 60, but it seems to be at least a more stable 30. And as far as the Pokemon models, now there are still some of those that date all the way back to like the N64, unfortunately, but they did redo some of the older ones. Some of the legendary Pokemon, I think, got a decent facelift. And the new Gen 4 Pokemon, I think, look pretty decent. And the attack effects look pretty nice. For the weather effects, there's actually some pretty good light distortion stuff in rain and ice and sandstorm and stuff. So I think that worked out pretty well. What did you think of this game graphically, Anne?
Yeah, like I'm not as impressed with like the Pokemon models just because they're, again, they appear, they're not, but they appear very similar to like stuff from like classic Pokemon Stadium. But I do love like the settings and like there are places where you play at night and there's water of like effects and flame effects and like neon lights in this Poketopia place. And being able to customize your character, I think there's a lot in the graphics that's very fun and very updated and new. Like it's not like I looked at the Pokemon and went like, oh my gosh, that's so much better than it used to be. But I do think the overall use of graphics in this game is just a more polished package. I guess it still has a very soft, smooth, cartoony, almost plastic look to all of it, but the style I feel like has really settled into itself, and therefore it's fun.
Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the characters, which do have models, although a lot of them are very clearly derived from ones in the GameCube games that were produced. There's a bit of a character customization feature. There are about half a dozen or so archetypes that you can do, about a couple male ones, a couple female ones in there. Now, I do have to point out, this is a Wii game, but you're not allowed to use Mii's as your avatar in the game. Was that a disappointment, or?
I didn't think about it until you just said it, but now I'm disappointed. That would have been so cute.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how well it would have worked with the art style that was in the rest of the game, and that may have been a problem there. There are a couple of Pokemon games that use Mii's, notably My Pokemon Ranch uses Mii's, and also Pokemon Rumble Blast. Those are both Umbrella games that use Mii's. This one does not. The trainers, and that's, I don't know. It seems like a bit of a missed opportunity, but I'm not sure how well it would have worked if they had tried that. Or if, because this was such an early game, they didn't have a chance to really do that in there.
Possibly, but just, open letter to the Nintendo company. Like, just anytime you have the opportunity to add your Mii into anything, the answer's always yes. Like, even if it doesn't fit the art style, it's just, we all want this.
Yeah, I mean, Mii's do still exist on the Switch to a certain extent. They're just not, they're not as big a deal as they were during the Wii and 3DS and Wii U system generations. But it was a big feature. And I'm sure there were some folks who wanted to use their Mii in this game. And there would be later Wii games, like, obviously it was a key feature in Wii Sports, but it would also come into play in, like, the Mario Kart Wii and other stuff like that. Now, what do you think about the overall difficulty of the game? That was something we mentioned, especially with Pokemon Stadium 2, is that the game can get insanely difficult. Like, you can definitely beat the main game of Battle Revolution using just rental passes. It gets a little harder from there on out, but I don't know, Anne, what are your thoughts?
Some of my friends' Pokemon from their DS. So, yeah, I'm trying to remember. I don't remember it being too terribly difficult. I don't remember noticing a huge difference between the rental Pokemon and the ones that you trained up from your other games. So I feel like in that sense, they didn't make it too much of a barrier against people playing.
Yeah. The difficulty system in this, there are kind of multiple rounds like there were, but it's each place like levels up individually, each stadium or coliseum or whatever. Unlike where in the stadium games where you would beat everything and then you offer a harder mode. In this one, I think there are like 7 or 8 or something like that levels to each one, and it does get legitimately difficult by the time you level it all the way up. And some of the places actually change to new battle formats in the post game, but certainly there weren't really points where I felt going through it on the first time on the early levels where there were super cheap stuff like you sometimes saw in the stadium games. So maybe, I don't know, depending on what you think, that could be an improvement or not. We had mentioned some of the online features, that this was a showcase of sorts for online play. But sort of the distinction was, first of all, the online, the base games could do that, although for Diamond and Pearl, I never really got to play them online at all. Just because of it has to do more with like wireless security and the DS not supporting a very strong version of it. So that's one reason I kind of didn't bother too much with it. But I don't know, maybe that wasn't the showstopper they had kind of hoped it was. And it sounds like, I don't know if you wouldn't have been able to play this online on the Wii Mini, but I don't know if when you were originally seeing this game, if it sort of struck you, if you got to see any online games when you were in Japan.
We did a little bit, and we kind of had fun with it, kind of more for the novelty. It's actually kind of funny. the half of the dorm I was in for just regular university students, my friends like paid for like to install internet. On the grad student side of the dorms, I think they had like internet as part of their dorms, but it was really crappy. So I don't have a ton of fond memories of online battling. It was kind of like, again, the novelty of it. It's like, oh my gosh, we're connecting with someone from Singapore, and then eventually the internet connection would be really bad, and we would not get very far with that. So that's mostly what I remember of online play for this specific game. I feel like other games did it better.
I suppose, but I mean, from a quality perspective, obviously this is a turn-based game, so it doesn't have like the constraints that you would have. I mean, obviously they did online with Smash Brothers Brawl, which we'll talk about probably at some point, which had its issues with latency and stuff that they've firmed up for the later generations of that. Mario Kart Wii did very well online, but even then, that seems more ambitious than this, since that's a real-time racing game, where if things aren't great, but. That seemed to work out decently well. But yeah, I'm not sure this was technically the greatest showcase. I don't know that any of the other Pokemon games on there really had online, other than, I guess, My Pokemon Ranch had some form of it, and stuff like that. And, the other thing we should mention here, this is the last of its kind. This is still, like, the main series games did not go true 3D until they hit the 3DS with X and Y. So this is, there's still a whole nother generation of what are essentially 2D games for the most part. They're more, like, Black and White are more 3D than Diamond and Pearl were, especially in the overworld. But the actual battling is a bit more, not like that. But they didn't bother to put a Battle Revolution 2 or Battle Revolution Black and White out for the Wii. This is the last game like this, and I think the sales might have factored into that. This game only sold like a little over 1 million copies, which might sound like a pretty decent amount, and for a lot of games it would be. But when you consider that they sold about 4 million copies of the original Pokémon Stadium on the N64, which had about a third the install base over its lifetime, as the Wii eventually would. And there might have been other factors, like the Wii was insanely hard to get for a lot of folks, so certain games may not have may have fallen by the wayside in the interim or stuff like that. I'm not sure, but this is the last of these stadium type games. And maybe they're completely redundant now especially as the stuff is on the Switch. But I don't know, Anne, what are your kind of ideas about that?
I kind of agree with you. Like, again, just that not everybody was able to get the Wii right when it came out, and this game came kind of on the earlier tail of the Wii. By the time a lot of people got that console, this game may have kind of petered out of the zeitgeist. There's like just the prestige of the Nintendo 64 and the original Pokemon Stadium. Like I still know people who have an N64 and play Pokemon Stadium and like invite people over for game night with it. Like, it's just a game and a console together that, again, were very fun and fulfill the nostalgia dopamine hit, and just, again, we're just packaged together at the right time to still be a thing. Whereas I feel like the Wii and this game's placement, and that it not being so, I don't know, groundbreaking and beloved as maybe the creators hoped it would be, like, I can see why it doesn't have that same maybe cachet as some of the other stadium style games.
And, coming so close to the release in each region of Diamond and Pearl may have, hamstrung them a bit, because, although this is, I believe you can sync like Platinum and Heart Gold Soul Silver with this. I think there's a way to do that. I think it is compatible. You lose some of the features there, like the Rotom forms aren't in there. and some of their stuff. And
Mm.
although the Wii is online, there isn't really a way to patch disc games. Remember, they had to do that weird workaround thing for Skyward Sword on the Wii when they found that really bad bug, and they needed to put out basically a WiiWare title to repair your save data so that you could get around that should you fall into that category. And so, as a result, they would have had to put out like basically a whole new disc to add features from Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, to say nothing of doing, Pokemon Black and White. So that may have worked out against it versus the Stadium games, which tend to be released at a point where that generation of Pokemon was fairly mature, or far enough along that they had a better idea of what to expect. Versus, like I said, in the fourth generation, they really started to push this intra-generation evolution, and this game was like that. But yeah, I think, to be honest, the main thing is it didn't sell that well is the lack of content, like not having either mini games or a single player mode, story mode. There obviously is a single player mode you play through, but it's all just battles. There's not a story to go with it. It sort of had the having neither of those worked against it, and maybe just because the DS had wireless local play, this wasn't as necessary. I don't know. Variety of reasons, but we have not seen a game like this since. All the other Pokemon side games go in a different direction. Obviously, there are sort of successors. Like, you want to stretch Pokemon Home certainly takes care of the storage aspect of these types of games. But I don't know. Maybe that's closer to my Pokemon Ranch. But kind of sad. I kind of do wish that this had been right up there with the Stadium games in terms of sales and reputation and stuff. And I think Nintendo probably had hoped that would happen, but it really didn't.
Yeah.
So, like I said, this is nowhere. And that game, too, Pokemon Dash, even though I do think that is not as good a game as Pokemon Battle Revolution, where was I going to go with that? Sorry. And, like I said, I think they just needed another 6 or 12 months on this game, which is sort of the same thing conclusion we came to with Pokemon Dash, an early DS Pokemon game. But I think in this particular case, it really would have made a difference if they had been able to fully realize their vision a bit more and release this, like I said, 6 to 12 months later.
I would agree with that. I feel like a little extra time to polish some things, come up with some other ideas, and again have the time to implement them could not have hurt it.
All right, well, I think that does it, and we can stop the recording there. That should give us something to end on. All right, so give it a second to finish the file there. Yep. All right. So, yeah, thank you to everyone who has stuck around, whether they're doing that live or on replay. We always appreciate that. If you have any comments on this game, please do let us know. We always appreciate that. And anything, have you had anything? I have to confess, I haven't followed seeing if you put any episodes out recently or how you've been managing on that end.
Yeah, no, I'd actually just had an episode scheduled to drop earlier today. So finishing up the 2-parter of May's contest battle and some poor child and his horrible family dynamics with his mother. So yeah, if y'all don't know, I run Pikapi podcast. I dissect the anime. It's great. But yeah, no, an episode just recently dropped. So go listen to that if you want to get real nerdy about your anime.
Yeah, I do hope that by the end of this month, once I get the last 2 done and edited, I'll put out an audio version of all those interviews I got at Anime Milwaukee last month. Once I get through all of that, it's a little difficult because there's basically like 3 streams of audio. There's one from the camera, there's one from the microphone I have pointed at the guest of honor, and then there's one that I'm holding myself. So editing all that together and then doing the video edit and then exporting the audio and then putting together a podcast episode is a lot of work. Like I said, I didn't have to go to all of those sessions, but I did, and I don't completely regret it. And I'm, like I said, most of the way through that. I do hope to have that episode out by the end of this month, and then and has gotten me the audio from our Secrets of the Jungle discussion, which will probably be split on my podcast feed across 2 different episodes. One for all the vocal songs, and another one for the other musical elements and the movie discussion. So I do hope to have that out. That'll probably be... Geez, we'll see when I can get around to all of this. Oh, boy. But that's why I haven't had a podcast episode come out. I have definitely been putting out content, but getting it all assembled into a podcast episode, I wasn't quite sure what to do with all this. It's a split the Anime Milwaukee stuff or stuff like that. But thank you very much for everyone who has hung around for this. And we hope to see, like I said, our next discussion, which will hopefully be sometime in April, will be the second set of Mystery Dungeon games, Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky. So very much looking forward in that. Like all the Mystery Dungeon games are well regarded for their music, but those ones might well be the peak. But yeah. So we'll have some definite interesting things to discuss there, especially in the game discussion and things like that. But thank you very much for everyone for coming in.
Thank you. Bye, guys.